ta'ala, when he talks about the issues and the masail, it's interesting that in case of fasting, he doesn't only say, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam, kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. The very first ayat in that passage where Allah says, "O who you believe, fasting has been made wajib on you just as it was made wajib on the nations who came before you, so that you may gain taqwa and piety through the process of fasting." But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't stop at that general statement. And this is a very common question people have, especially when you talk to non-Muslims. Then, Muslims have to fast in the month of Ramadan. Immediately they start questioning. What happens to the old people? What happens to those who are not feeling well? Those, who need to take medicine more frequently. And so, yes, Quran and, the religion of Islam is a religion which looks at all different situations. These statements are for the normal situation, but they are all elaborate teachings about, the situations which would not come under the cover of what we call normal. In this passage itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا. If in the month of Ramadan, someone among you is a marid, not feeling well, أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ, or he is traveling, فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ, then those people have to fast some other days. So already the provision is there that if people are not in their, health situation, is not going to help them, then they are exempted. In some cases, the exemption is total. In other cases, they have to make it up after the month of Ramadan. Especially, those who cannot fast because of their health or whatever reason. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ, those who find it difficult, what do they do? فِدْيَةُ طَعَامِ مِسْكِينٍ. They have to feed the poor. And so these are the issues that will inshallah cover this evening, as far as the old age is concerned, and then about the issue of medical and health situation as far as fasting, and then the pregnant and nursing mother while she is fasting, and then we'll look at the use of medicine, whether you can use medicine when you are fasting or not. And finally, we'll talk about some of the very basic issues that we get the question all the time about traveling in the month of Ramadan. Salawat. Let us, begin with the old age, the elderly people, those who find it difficult, either cannot, fast at all, or even if they can fast, they go through difficulty which is above the normal level of difficulty. We are not saying that anyone who finds fasting difficult is exempted. Then everyone goes through difficulty anyway. Ramadan is a challenge. We're talking about difficulty which is beyond the normal level of acceptance. And in that case, Islam is very clear. For those people who, because of their old age, cannot fast, they are totally exempted from fasting. Not only that, they shouldn't do in Ramadan, maybe do it in winter when the days are shorter. No, they don't have to do qaza at all. Yes, there is something else, as the ayat says, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ. They have to pay fidya. Now, before even I go to it, the question comes up, who will decide whether I have that level of difficulty which is acceptable, which exempt me from fasting? Well, it's not the doctor. It is you yourself. You have to make the judgment. You have to make the decision that I find it difficult, and then, that is the way you will go through it. Now, when we talk about fidya, it's important to understand because there is still confusion between two things. The question comes up, what is fidya? Fidya is not kafara. There are two different things. When we talk about fidya, fidya is actually compensation. Because I'm not fasting, therefore I will do this. Whereas kafara means that I still have to make up the fast which I missed without any excuse. And then I have to pay penalty, the fine. And that is kafara. So fidya is more a respectable thing rather than kafara. Kafara is a fine. And so remember, when we talk about especially elderly people here, the issue is that because you are not fasting now, you give fidya. Now what is fidya? For each day, you pay 750 grams of flour or rice for the poor and the needy, preferably from the Shi'i community or from the larger Muslim community. It is preferable if you are able to give not only 750 grams per day, but make that double, 1.5 kilo. And so when you calculate that for the whole month, the basic rate would be 22.5 kilo of flour or rice for the whole month. And if you go with what is mustahab and recommended, you go with 45 kilo of the flour or the rice. The important thing to keep in mind, many people say, okay, what is the dollar value of that? So we pay the money. No. When it comes to the issue of fidya, that has to be paid in kind, not in cash. So even if you're paying, let's say, in Africa or India or Pakistan or Iraq, you send the money, but you will have to ask the people over there to buy flour or rice and then give it to the masakin and the faqara. So it has to be paid in kind, not in cash. And therefore, when people ask me, what is the value? I said, if you're going to pay in Canada, then you go and look at the grocery store. If you are the one who buy the best of the rice, look at the average price there and make the calculation. 22.5 kilo or 45 kilos. But if you're paying somewhere else, then you look at the rate over there. Of course, there is nothing wrong in paying more if you want. In there, it will be more than 45 kilo, for example. But the point is that it has to be given in kind, and just giving the cash is not sufficient. We also get a question about fidya here, that suppose there is an elderly person whom you are saying now is exempted from fasting, he doesn't have even to do qaza, but he has to pay fidya. Well, if he is not even capable of paying the fidya, then what happens? Well, then nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot ever impose a burden on a person which is beyond his ability. So if a person is on the receiving end of this whole process, then even fidya would be exempted from him. He or she doesn't have to even pay the fidya. Salawat. We will have some time before namaz and at the end of the program. So if you have any questions, I'll be around here. Inshallah, you can come to me and talk about it. Let's now move on to the medical and health issues. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Baqarah says, وَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا. At the end, فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. If a person among you is mariz, he's not feeling well, then he has to fast some other days. So when we look at the illness, medical and health conditions, there are two situations. One is for the normal person who just becomes sick, ill temporarily. He has a fever for 2-3 days or whatever, and then he will get over it. In that kind of situation, basically they just have to do qaza after the month of Ramadan. However, suppose a person was not feeling well in Ramadan for 3 days, didn't fast. Ramadan passed, Shawwal came, Zulqa'ad, Zulhijj, Muharram, Safar, all the way to Rajab and Sha'ban, and he did not do the qaza of the 3 days, and next Ramadan comes in, then what happens? Now it was not wajib for him to do the qaza immediately after Ramadan. He had the whole year, but he didn't do it. So then Ramadan comes, next Ramadan. So that qaza is still there, but because of that 1 year's gap now, fidya would be added to it. Still not kafara because he was mariz. So it is the issue of, then if they do qaza after the next Ramadan for the year before, then they have to do the qaza as well as pay fidya for the 3 days. This is on the basis of ihtiyat al-luzumi according to Ayatollah Sistani. It's a very rare situation, but sometimes we get this question that a person has a temporary illness, but it continues. He became ill in the month of Ramadan, and that situation went up and down. He was not fully cured, and it took him 1 year till the next Ramadan comes. Because he was not cured before the next Ramadan, that person would be exempted from qaza. He just has to pay fidya there, because he didn't have the opportunity to do the qaza between the last Ramadan and the next Ramadan. So this is as far as the temporary situation of maraz and illness is concerned. But let us look at situations which is kind of long-term. A person is suffering from diabetic, for example, and he or she needs to eat more frequently. Or there might be an illness where the medication has to be taken every 6 hours. And that becomes very difficult, especially with the long fasting that we will have in the summer this year. And so here again, the issue is that such a person has to make the decision on their own. It's not the doctor's call, it is the individual's call. Of course, you can listen to the advice of the doctor and look at their opinion and be swayed by them, but the final decision is yours, whether you can fast or not. Of course, if the doctor says clearly that if you do not take your medications on time, or in a diabetic case, you do not eat that frequently, if you are without food and drink for that long, this will have serious, situation with your health, then of course you have to listen to that advice of the expert. And for such a person, basically the issue is that they don't have to fast, and they will not do qaza, they will just pay fidya, because this is an ongoing long-term illness situation. However, in those cases where they have the ability to do qaza, let's say in winter, so it's an illness where a person would not be able to fast in the month of Ramadan, that person would be exempted. There is no issue of, fidya there. But if he is in a condition that maybe in winter time, when the days are shorter, he will be able to fast, then he should do the qaza. Again, whether that is possible or not, the judgment is left on the individual to make that judgment whether they can do that or they can not do that. Salawat. Now, in this case where of long-term illness, they don't have to do qaza, as I said, unless they are able to do it in winter. But even if they can't do that, there is no issue of qaza at all. Fidya would still be applicable in that long-term illness situation. Let us now move on to a situation of the ladies, a pregnant woman or a nursing mother, and the issue of fasting. If a lady feels that by fasting while she is pregnant or while she is nursing her baby, it is going to have an impact on her and consequently on the flow and the amount of milk or on the baby's health, then she is also exempted at that time in that year from fasting in the month of Ramadan. Of course, she will have to do qada once she has, gone after that period of pregnancy or nursing. Then she has to do the qaza later on, as well as pay fidya for the days that she has missed. There's a question which came actually just today to me in the email, that there is a email circulating that Ayatul Sistani says that the women who are nursing their baby, they are only exempted from this situation of fasting in Ramadan if they cannot find alternative means of feeding the baby, either getting another nurse to do that or use baby formula. Yes, the ruling is there, but on a practical level, especially here, to find somebody who would come, let's say, twice a day to feed your baby is not really that easy and practical. So we'll still go with the situation of a lady who is finding herself in a situation where she is breastfeeding and she knows by fasting is going to have an impact on her and the baby's health. Then she would be exempted from the fasting of the month of Ramadan. She will do qaza later on, whether it's after a year or 2 years, whenever she ends the breastfeeding process. Then, of course, she also has to pay fidya for the days that she has missed. Then we go on to the issue of use of medicine. Some people think that, if you just take a pill, while you're fasting, it's still okay. You continue. No. Even if you take a small pill, your roza is no more roza. Roza fasting means not eating and drinking. So either you're fasting or you're not fasting. You can't be eating and then also still be fasting. And when it comes to medication, the rulings are slightly different. So if we can look at the screen, if the medication is administered through the mouth, then the fasting is batil. Anything which goes through the mouth, the fasting would be batil. What about the use of inhaler or puffer? According to Ayatul Sistani, he says that when you inhale for, making better your breathing situation, and if this is going into your air passage, then your fast is okay. And this is what normally happens. When you inhale, that's where it goes. It doesn't go into the food passage. And so use of inhaler and puffer for those who are suffering with asthma, for example, would not make their fast batil. It would be okay. However, other maraji do not all have the same opinion on the issue. So if you're in muqallideen of some other maraji, you can come and talk to me. We'll talk about it. Now, if the medicine is administered through other than the mouth, then we have to see. For example, if it is a feeding tube, so it's nutrition coming in another way, other than the mouth, then the fasting would be batil. If it is liquid enema, and this is one of the muftirat of fasting anyway, that also will make the fast batil. If it is IV drip, if it is being used for medical, purpose, it is for the medicine and not nutrition, then the fasting would be okay. So if somebody is getting IV drip for, let's say, treating infection, even though that person is fasting, his roza would still be okay. But if somebody, has become very weak and they feed him nutrition through IV while he's fasting, well, his fast has become batil. Then we come to the issue of nozzle drops, eye drops, and injection. These are not a problem when it comes to fasting, as long as, and these are normally not substitute of food. The ruling is that whatever, the nasal drop and eye drop, as long as you don't feel it in your throat, because inside, they're all connected. So if you don't feel it in your throat, you are okay. But if you feel it here in the throat, then the roza becomes batil. Now, in all these cases where medicine would make, in the cases where use of medicine will make the roza batil, again, it's because of medical reason. So there is no kafara there. The person only has to do qaza after that. One more question, which is not about taking medicine, and that we get it every year, that Maulana, the doctor, has asked me to go for blood test, and I'm fasting. There is no problem. As long as things come out, doesn't break the fast. It's only when you put it inside, that's where the problem is there. So blood test is blood coming out of you. So that will not harm your fasting at all. So if you have to go for blood test, there's no problem. Unless you are an individual that after blood test you will become very weak and you will not be able to continue the fasting, then if you can postpone it till after Ramadan, that's what you should do. So it depends in that situation. Salawat on Naik Barao. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayat that I recited earlier from Surah Baqarah, ayat 184, He says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Those who are mariz, not feeling well, or those who are on safar, they are traveling on a journey, then they will fast some other days. And this is where we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy and grace, He says that in traveling, I would like you to be comfortable. So you don't have to worry about fasting. You are actually not allowed to fast when you are traveling. We get this question all the time. Maybe this ayat is for the days when people were traveling on camels and horses. No, it doesn't matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a concession. For us to say, thank you, I don't want it, is actually insulting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When He is giving a concession, we have to take it. And so this is where we see that when it comes to the issue of traveling, fasting would not be valid unless there are certain situations. Number one, if you travel and go somewhere, and once you reach to your destination, if you are going to stay there for less than 10 days, 9 nights and 10 days, the first and the last, then if you are less than that, then your namaz will be qasr, 4 rakats becomes 2, and your roza would not count there. Of course, there is no penalty because traveling in the month of Ramadan is not a sin. It is not haram to travel in the month of Ramadan, so there is no kafara, there is no issue of fidya. You just have to do qaza when you come back after the month of Ramadan. However, if you travel, the issue is, how do we consider a person to be a traveler? Once a person a traveler has reached to his destination, and if he stays there for 10 or more days, then he or she is no more considered a musafir. He's no more a traveler. His namaz would be full, and his roza also will apply there. However, when we say 10 days, it has to be 10 days continuously. Somebody came, let's say, to Toronto with the intention of staying here for 10 days, but in between, the relatives take them for a trip somewhere else. Even though it's just a day trip, and they go to Buffalo, for example, or Windsor or Montreal, and then come back, then that 10 days, continuity of the 10 days has been interrupted. And so that person will not be able to have full namaz or fast at that time. So it has to be 10 days continuous stay. If you want to just go for an overnight trip and you're fasting, suppose you have been invited to one of these towns around Toronto, Niagara Falls or, Waterloo, and you leave after Zohar in your town. So you go there, spend the whole night. Next day, as long as you can come before Zohar. So you leave your town after Zohar, come back next day, cut-off time would be Zohar before that. Then your fasting for both days are okay. It doesn't mean you must stay the whole night there. I'm just giving an example. You go on Thursday after Zohar, and as long as you're able to get back next day before Zohar, both days fasting is okay. But if you travel from your hometown before Zohar time, your roza is batil. So remember, Zohar is the line. You can travel after Zohar, that day's fasting would be okay. If you travel before Zohar, then your fast would be batil. Of course, there is no kafara, no fidya. You just have to make qaza later on because traveling is not haram in fasting. Suppose you went to a long journey and then you are coming back after a few days back to your home. And your flight, for example, reaches here before Zohar time. If you did not eat or drink anything during that flight from Fajr time to the time you reach to your town, then you are okay to make the niyyat after that I will fast today. But if you have your delicious breakfast on the plane and then you say, I'm here before Zohar, no, it doesn't work. So if you did not, you had the permission actually to eat on the way because you had not yet reached to your town. So if you ate, there's nothing haram. But if you're planning to use that day, then you should refrain from the Fajr of wherever you are when you are traveling till the time you reach to your town. Don't eat and drink anything. Once you reach to a town, then you do niyyat of fasting on that day. Your fast would be okay. The only travelers who actually can fast and do their namaz full are those whom we will call kasirus safar, frequent travelers. Nothing to do with the aeroplane plans here, points here. They're talking about, frequency of traveling. So a person who is defined as kasirus safar, even in the state of traveling and journey, that person will do the full namaz and will able to also fast in the month of Ramadan, even though he or she is traveling. And who is kasirus safar? Number one, a person whose work itself is traveling. A driver, a pilot. So their work itself means, is defined as traveling. So for them, it is, full namaz as well as fasting. Or a person whose work is not traveling, but traveling is part of basically traveling is involved in the work. For example, a salesman who has to go from one place to another, or a construction worker doesn't just work on one house or one area. They will be moving from one area to another, one city to another. So even if they have to travel to other cities to do their work is construction, but in order to do that, they move around from one place to another. Or a consultant who visits his clients in different parts of the city or outside the city. Such people, if their traveling is actually 1/3 of the year, then they are classified as Kasir Safar. Their namaz would be full and their roza also would be valid. Or those whose workplace is more than 24 miles away from their city limit. So they live in Toronto, work in Waterloo, for example, everyday commute and come back. So for them, since their workplace is far away and they have to travel to their workplace every day, for them, namaz would be full as well as the fasting would be valid, even though they are traveling at that time. Salawat padhne ke baad. Of course, for that person, if he travels to the same city for an invitation of a friend's house, then that is not counted. Then that will become qasr for him because he is not going for the purpose of work, even though his workplace is in that other city. So this is how we define, Kasir al-Safar in the Shi'i fiqh. Salawat. خداوند عالم نے شریعت اسلامیہ کو بہت ہی آسان فلیکسیبل شریعہ بنایا ہے. افسوس ہے کہ ہم لوگ خواہ اس کو بڑا مشکل سمجھتے ہیں. جتنے احکام چھٹے امام کی ایک حدیث ہے کہ ہم پر واجب ہوئے ہیں، ہمارے کیپیسٹی کے لحاظ سے نہیں ہے بلکہ اس سے بھی کم ہے. مثلا امام فرماتے ہیں کہ 5 نمازیں واجب ہیں، 17 رکعت، لیکن ہماری ایبلٹی اس سے زیادہ ہے. جو لوگ مثلا تمام نوافل پڑھتے ہیں، اٹ مینز دے ہیو دی ایبلٹی ٹو ڈو 51 رکعت. تو نماز کا وجوب جو ہے ہماری ایبلٹی سے بھی کم ہے. روزہ صرف رمضان میں واجب ہے، لیکن بہت سے لوگ ہیں جو پورے رجب اور شعبان میں بھی روزہ رکھتے ہیں. ہر مہینے میں جو مخصوص ایام ہے روزے کے، اس میں بھی روزہ رکھتے ہیں. تو رمضان کا روزے کا واجب ہونا بھی ہمارے کیپیسٹی سے کم کی بات ہو رہی ہے. حج بھی زندگی میں ایک ہی بار ہے. ماشاءاللہ مومنین جو ہیں کئی سال جاتے رہتے ہیں. خمس کی بات ہے، زکوٰۃ کی بات ہے، جتنے ریشیو ہیں آپ دیکھیں ہماری ایبلٹی اور کیپیبلٹی سے بھی کم کی بات ہو رہی ہے. تو شریعت مشکل نہیں ہے. اور اس میں اگر آپ دیکھیں ایک مسئلہ ہمیں بیان کرنا ہے جو ہم نے انگریزی میں بیان نہیں کیا تھا، کہ لوگ اپنی بچیوں کی بات کرتے ہیں کہ بچیاں جو ہیں 9 سال کی عمر میں بالغہ ہو جاتی ہیں، ان پر نماز بھی واجب ہے، روزہ بھی واجب ہے. لیکن جب رمضان کی بات آتی ہے، اسپیشلی اگر وہ بالغ ہو رہی ہیں اس سیزن میں جو سمر میں رمضان پڑتا ہے، تو ہر بچے میں وہ ایبلٹی نہیں ہوتی ہے. اس لیے کہا جاتا ہے کہ روزہ کو گریجولی پہلے سے انٹروڈیوس کریں. مثلا اگر وہ 6 سال کی بھی ہے تو ہاف اے ڈے روزہ رکھے تاکہ وہ یوز ٹو ہو جائے اس کے. بائی دی ٹائم آف وہ بھی روزانہ نہیں، مے بی ونس اے ویک شروع کریں تاکہ وہ یوز ٹو ہو اس سسٹم سے. لیکن پھر بھی کچھ بچیاں ہوتی ہیں کہ جو فزیکلی ان میں یہ ایبلٹی نہیں ہوتی ہے اس ایج میں کہ وہ روزہ رکھ سکیں. سچویشنز جو ہمیں بتائی گئی ہے، کبھی کبھی وہ روزہ رکھتی بھی ہیں تو وومیٹنگ اور بہت ہی ایکسٹریم ویکنس شروع ہو جاتی ہے. اگر ایسی سچویشن ہے تو وہاں کیا مسئلہ ہوگا؟ وہاں بھی شریعت نے سہولت کو دیکھا ہے. واجب ان کے لیے ضرور ہے، لیکن اگر رمضان گرمیوں میں آ رہا ہے اور گرمی کا معاملہ ہے، طولانی روزہ ہے، تو ان کو آپ ایگزیمشن دے سکتے ہیں، بلکہ انہیں ٹرین کریں کہ آدھا دن روزہ رکھیں. جب طبیعت خراب ہونے لگے تو توڑ دیں تاکہ وہ یوز ٹو ہو سکیں گریجولی اس میں. اور بعد میں وہ قضا کریں گے، اس میں کفارے کی بات نہیں ہے، اس لیے کہ وہ جان بوجھ کے نہیں ہو رہا ہے. وہ اپنی فزیکل ایبلٹی کے لحاظ سے ان کے لیے مشکل ہو رہا ہے، تو وہ پھر ونٹر کے زمانے میں جب دن چھوٹے ہوتے ہیں اس میں وہ اپنا قضا کر لیں۔ تو یہاں یہ مسئلہ نہیں ہے کہ کچھ لوگ فتویٰ شاپنگ کرنے کے لیے جاتے ہیں کہ بھائی یہ لڑکیوں کے بلوغ کا ایج ذرا ایکسٹینڈ کر دیا جائے 9 سے جو ہے 13 سال کا۔ نہیں، اس میں بھی اگر سچویشن ہوتی ہے تو اس کے بھی حل موجود ہیں۔ وہ سمپل یہ ہے کہ وہ بعد میں ونٹر کے زمانے میں وہ قضا کرے گی، اس میں کفارے کی بات نہیں ہے، تاکہ پھر فزیکلی اس لیول پہ آ سکے کہ جہاں وہ پھر نارملی روزہ رکھ سکے۔ صلوات پڑھنے ایک بار آپ۔ تو حلال و حرام کے مسائل میں بہرحال ان چیزوں کو دیکھنا چاہیے۔ ہمارے لیے اسوہ حسنہ اور اگزامپل جو ہیں ہمارے اہل بیت ہیں۔ بس ایک مثال پر، چونکہ بچیوں کی بات ہم نے کی ہے، کربلا کی ایک بچی کو یاد کرنا ہے، اس لیے کہ ہمارے یہاں واجب اور حرام کے مسائل جو ہیں وہ اس وقت ہوتے ہیں جب بچی جو ہے 9 سال کی ہو جاتی ہے۔ کربلا میں 3 دن سے پانی نہیں تھا، اور چونکہ پانی بھی نہیں تھا لہذا غذا کے بھی کی فراہمی نہیں تھی اس وقت۔ اور اس کے بعد جب یہ اہل حرم اسیر ہوئے ہیں، کربلا سے جب ان کو کوفہ لایا گیا ہے، تو ایک روایت ملتی ہے کہ ابن زیاد نے حکم دیا تھا کوفہ کے لوگوں کو کہ وہ باہر نکل کے آئیں کرو، تاکہ وہ اپنی دہشت کو ان کے دلوں میں ڈالنا چاہ رہا تھا کہ ان اسیروں کو دیکھیں اور وہ خوف ان کے دل میں طاری ہو جائے۔ جتنے مرد تھے وہ روڈ پر آئے تھے دونوں سائڈ پہ، اور عورتیں جو ہیں اپنے گھر کے چھتوں پر آئی تھیں۔ جب یہ قافلہ آیا ہے اور اہل حرم کی محملیں جب آئی ہیں شہر کے اندر، اور خواتین کی نظر جب جاتی ہیں اہل حرم پر اور بچیوں پر، عورتوں کے دل بہرحال زیادہ نرم ہوتا ہے، انہیں احساس ہوا کہ یہ بچے جو ہے بھوکے لگ رہے ہیں۔ ایک خاتون جاتی ہیں اپنے گھر سے خرمے لے آتی ہیں اور پھینکنا شروع کرتی ہیں جو اہل حرم کے محمل پر گری ہیں۔ ایک روایت ملتی ہے کہ جناب سکینہ جو 4 سال کی بچی تھی امام کی، اس خرمے کو اٹھاتی ہے اور اپنے دہن میں رکھتی ہیں۔ جناب زینب وہاں بیٹھی تھی، اپنے ہاتھ کو بڑھانے کے بعد اس خرمے کے دانے کو نکالتی ہیں اور واپس پھینکتی ہیں اس گھر کی طرف جہاں سے وہ خرمہ آیا تھا، یہ کہتے ہوئے کہ ان الصدقۃ علینا حرام نحن وصار اہل البیت، ہم خاندان اہل بیت کے افراد ہیں، اسیر ضرور ہے لیکن اس حالت میں بھی صدقہ ہم کھانے والے نہیں ہیں، ہمارے لیے حرام ہے۔ بی بی سے صرف اتنا کہیں گے، بی بی سکینہ یا رقیہ جی 4 سال کی بچی ہے، ابھی سن تکلیف اور بلوغ پر نہیں پہنچی ہے، اس کے لیے یہ خرمہ کھانا کوئی حرام نہیں تھا، لیکن پھر بھی زینب یہی کہیں گی کہ میرے بھائی نے قربانی دی تھی تاکہ تمہیں احساس ہو کہ کیا صحیح ہے، کیا غلط ہے، اور کیا حلال ہے اور کیا حرام ہے۔ الا لعنۃ اللہ علی القوم الظالمین سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون۔ خداوند اس قبل بات قبول فرما، ہمارے گناہوں کو بخش دے، ہمارے توفیقات میں اضافہ فرما۔ خداوندہ مسلمان اور خصوصاً شیعہ علی جہاں جہاں پریشان حال ہیں ان کو اپنے حفظ امان میں رکھ، خصوصاً عراق میں جو سچویشن ہے۔ خداوندہ تکفیری گروہ اگر یہ قابل ہدایت ہیں تو خداوندہ ان کی ہدایت فرما، اور اگر قابل ہدایت نہیں ہے تو خداوندہ انہیں نیست نابود فرما، تاکہ ان کے شر اور آفت سے مومنین محفوظ رہیں۔ امام کے ظہور میں تعجل فرما۔ ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم۔